I'm joined today by Thomas Caldwell and his wife Sharon Caldwell. They have a great story to tell about their January 6th experience, and in particular, there is a new book out, The Mouths of the Wicked, that goes over this particular story. And I'm grateful that they're here to give us a little insight into this really a terrible journey they had to go through. And in particular, their story is woven into the Oath Keepers case with the strange caveat that Tom was not an Oath Keeper. And yet they did everything they could to destroy the lives of this great couple who I've had the real fortune of getting to know. And so I'm extremely grateful that Tom and Sharon have taken time to help get this story out, to put the story out, and to tell the truth about what they've endured at the hands of our government. So with that, I just want to say, Sharon and Tom, thank you for being with me, and I can't wait for you to get your story out.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. You do have a book out, and it's quite a book. I thank you for sending me a copy, and I appreciate that little note that you left in there.
I just would like to maybe start off by doing a tiny bit of a shameless plug for the book because Tom has worked really, really hard on it. And I know I'm biased because I love him, but I think he did a great job on it. And just to let your listeners know that the full title is called The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. And we, like many other J6 folks, have been through the ringer. But I just wanted to mention briefly why people might want to read this book. One is because even if you think you know something about Tom's story, trust me, you don't. And Tom tries to go to some detail here about what really happened. Also, I just wanted to point out that and I always say our January 6th story is unlike anyone else's. And I know everybody's story is unique. Everybody's story is unique, and everybody's story deserves to be heard. But I think ours is really, really different in a number of ways. Just one of them would be that Tom and I, for example, went to J6 together, just the two of us, husband and wife date, more or less. And it was just the two of us together that whole day, the day before, the day after. And we did not go into the Capitol. We never entered the Capitol building. We never participated in any violence. We never saw any violence. Then the short time that we were at the Capitol, we were on the west side, but we never saw any violence. And we left when we had heard the Capitol had been breached. We left, went back to our car, and went home, thinking that was the end of it. But 2 weeks later, the FBI, of course, typical pre-dawn raided our home, and they arrested Tom, but not me. And from the very beginning, that smelled bad to, of course, both of us, because we're like, okay, what's going on here? Why are they going after him and not me when we did exactly the same things on J6? And so that's one difference, because I know other couples or other families that went together to J6, and if one was arrested, typically they all were, for the most part. And so that's just one difference. And then again, having not gone into the Capitol, having not participated in any violence whatsoever, why in the world did our government want to put Tom in jail for the rest of his life? So there's a lot of differences, I think, in our story from that of other folks. And the other thing I want to mention is Tom brings the receipts. That's a very popular term today. He brings the receipts. He takes you through, what it was really like for him while he was incarcerated, what the trial was like, the kangaroo court. And, I think the way he's written it, you feel like you were there, but the nice thing is when he says, for example, so-and-so perjured themselves, he doesn't just say that. He provides the evidence. He doesn't say something without providing the proof. So he has endnotes, footnotes, of transcripts, court filings, whatever. He brings the proof for everything that he says. So those are some reasons people might want to read it. The other piece I do want to mention is that, why did Tom write this? He wrote this for two reasons mainly. One, to educate folks about what an out-of-control government can do to law-abiding citizens, and everybody should be scared, because if they can do this to us, they can do it to anybody. And two, also to give glory to God, because without our faith and without our strong marriage, we never, ever would have gotten through this, because we were crushed like so many people were. So that's just a little bit about the book. I'm going to mention it right now. I'll probably mention it at the end too, but if people are interested in purchasing it, they can do so at this following website. It's Puffin Publishers, all one word, Puffin like the bird, Puffin, puffinpublishers.com. They can go there and get a copy of the book. And it's in soft copy right now, but we hope in another week we'll have an e-book version as well. It's not quite out yet. So a little bit about the book, done with that. Should we start talking about our story?
Sure. That's why we're here.
Okay. Okay. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to start at the beginning, because I think it's a good place to start.
Begin at the beginning, as it
Yes, just a little bit about us. So Tom and I will have been married 26 beautiful years tomorrow. Our wonderful anniversary is tomorrow. And prior to J6, we live on a small farm in Virginia where we've raised beef cattle in the past. Tom has been retired for a number of years. I recently retired right before J6, actually. We thought we were going to travel after we were both fully retired. But at any rate, Tom was in the Navy. He is a retired lieutenant commander from the Navy. He was in the Navy almost 20 years. And he is also a service-connected disabled veteran. When he was in the Navy, he worked mostly in the area of naval intelligence. And me, on the other hand, I had a number of different careers, if you will. I worked in human resources for many years. We both ran a small IT company together for a while. I worked actually at our local elections office for about 7 years. And anyway, we retired thinking we were going to travel, and just had a little very peaceful life on our farm until things kind of blew up with J6. But I think in terms of January 6th, where I really need to start is with a question that we get all the time from people who hear about Tom's story. And that question, the question we get most often is, well, Tom, if you're not an Oath Keeper, how did you get involved in the Oath Keeper's indictment? Why are you on that indictment? Why were you scooped up and implicated, with this group? So I'll start there. So Tom, by the way, when he does, he's been doing some radio shows and podcasts recently. He gives a very condensed version of this, but since we have a little more time today, I'm going to provide a little bit more detail. Back in November 2020, there was an election, and President Trump, quote unquote, lost. Okay, and many people were upset. So because we didn't understand how that happened. So there were, as a result of that, many little local rallies popping up, and people called them Stop the Steal rallies. There was one locally that popped up near us, and our Virginia House of Delegates representative, who we knew, we'd voted for him, he'd been in the House of Delegates for about 10 years. He was one of the organizers of a local Stop the Steal rally here in Virginia, and he called us. He called Tom, and he said, Tom, I'm doing this rally. We're going to, bring speakers together. We're going to, pump people up, encourage them, try to keep people, engaged, even though, things aren't looking real good right now because of the election. We want to put together this little rally. Can you help me? I can't. The rally, by the way, was in a farmer's field and outdoors. They said, I can't find anybody who has porta potties. So he said, Tom, can you help me find porta potties? And oh, by the way, would you like to speak? And so Tom jumped up and said, hey, I'm on it. I'm on it.
Yeah. So potties and a speaking appearance. How do you beat that, right?
So like I said, we were very familiar with our delegate. We wanted to help him out, so we said sure, and so Tom did. He found porta potties and he agreed to speak. So we went to this local rally, and there were a number of speakers, Tom just being one of them. So Tom did his little speaking engagement where he basically gave kind of a history lesson, as I recall. Tom loves history. And he gave a history lesson. And, when you attend these things, a lot of times when you're done speaking, and this again was outdoors, they had a little stage. He gets off the stage, and oftentimes people will come up to you and say, hey, I really liked your speech, and they'll introduce themselves and so and so. So that's exactly what happened. He gave a little speech. He comes off. A couple guys come up to him, hey, we really liked your speech. Love to introduce you to somebody. So they ended up introducing him to, of all people, Stuart Rhodes. And I was at the rally, but I wasn't present at this point in time. But so apparently, Tom talked to Stuart a little bit, and Stuart told Tom a little bit about the Oath Keepers. And then, so later that day, when we were driving home from the rally, Tom told me, hey, I met this guy, Stuart Rhodes, and he has this group called the Oath Keepers, and one of the things that apparently Stewart had asked him was, he said, hey, the Million MAGA March is coming up in November. And that was, so first we had the election, then we had this little mini rally. And then right after, on the heels of that, was going to be the Million MAGA March in Washington, D.C. And Tom and I kind of really both wanted to go, but we weren't sure if we were going to be able to, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, we did end up going, and it was amazing. And I think there may be more people there in D.C. for that than there were on January 6th. Not sure, but it seemed like there were so many people. It was, I thought, a lot of fun. But anyway, Stewart said, hey, I've got people in my group, the Oath Keepers, they'd love to go, but, we're kind of a large organization for all over the country. We want to go together as a group. Would you know of any, perhaps somebody local who has, because we're not that far from D.C., would you know of somebody who might have a field we could camp in, so we could camp together, go to the Million MAGA March together, and not have to pay high D.C. hotel prices? And so, Tom's telling me this on our drive home. So we were talking about it on our drive home. And, we know a couple farmers in the area with a lot of acreage. And so we asked around. And we actually found a couple other farmers who were more than willing to have these folks camped on their property. Now, keep in mind, up until this meeting, neither Tom nor I had ever even heard of the Oath Keepers or Stewart Rhodes. Had no idea, anything, nothing about them. But, we learned a little bit about them, and it seemed like, okay, what we learned was they're a patriotic group. They are primarily made up of veterans. Tom's a veteran. Also current and former law enforcement officers, and also first responders. And we thought, wow, those are all people that we like. We like veterans and first responders and law enforcement. So it sounded like a good group of folks, and they were, and I still think that they are. However, as it ended up, we learned that there were not going to be that many people that were going to do this camping thing. It was a smaller group than we originally thought. So we said, well, we have a small farm. They can camp on our property. We've got outdoor water. We have some outdoor facilities they can use. So they did. So a small group of Oath Keepers camped on our property for a couple nights so that they could attend the Million MAGA March together. And I got to tell you, Tom and this is the very first time we met them. They did not come into our house because we really didn't know them and, that kind of thing, but they did camp outside. We did because we wanted them to feel comfortable on our property and we wanted to welcome them. We actually, one of our neighbors came over and he set up his propane grill. We did cookouts, like for 2 nights, cookouts, barbecues, and we had kind of a social picnic type of thing with them. So that's where Tom and I got to know a few of the members of the Oath Keepers, primarily from North Carolina. A few others were up here as well. But they were really great folks. I mean, and from my observing, and again, we were not with them the whole time. Most of the time, Tom and I were in the house. They were outside doing whatever they were doing. But we did socialize with them during dinner time on 2 nights, and it was this cookout, and we really liked them. And so when they left, in the meantime, we got to know them, a few of them a little bit. So when they did eventually leave after the Million MAGA March, Tom exchanged phone numbers with a few of them, 2 or 3 people that he kind of hit it off with. One person in particular, I'll just say his name, it was Paul Stamey from the North Carolina Oath Keeper group. And Tom and Paul, they seemed to hit it off. They were about the same age, veterans, had similar disabilities. I hate to say it, but when you get old, you talk about, my aching hip and this and that and the other thing. So anyway, right. Exchanged phone numbers, and that's how he, kind of was. He kept in casual contact, very casual contact with a couple people. When I mean casual contact, I'm talking, hey, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, all that kind of stuff. So that's how we met a few of the Oath Keepers, but Tom was he never joined the group and all that. So do you want to add to that, honey? Maybe? Oh, okay. So anyway, that's it. They camped here. They left. And when they left, I told Tom, hey, that was a good experience. I enjoyed having them here. They probably left our property in better shape than they found it. They were awesome campers. And I told Tom that was a great experience. If they ever wanted to camp here again, they would be welcome. But they never did. It was just that one time. So that was pretty much it. And then really from there, we fast forward to January 6th. Okay. So fast forwarding kind of to January 6th. I got an email. It was on December 21st. In the evening, I got an email from the group Women for America First, because I was on their email list. And that was the first time that I heard about the J6 rally in D.C. and that Trump was speaking at it. And I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. I showed the email to Tom right away. So this is in the evening of the 21st, and we're thinking, should we go? Should we go? Should we go? It's going to be cold. It's going to be this. But we decided to go. So the next thing Tom did in the morning, the following morning, was the very first thing he did was he got up and he made hotel reservations for us, just the two of us, at a hotel in Arlington where it was easy access to and from the Ellipse, where President Trump will be speaking. To the Ellipse, not to the Capitol. It was easy access to the Ellipse. So he made it for us only. And it was only some time after that we were, telling other people where we were staying. And I can't believe they still have rooms available and that type of thing. So that's how we went to January 6th. And you want to take it from there?
Well, basically, as Sharon said, it was a husband and wife thing, and we went down there, and we were hoping to actually show how foolish I was. We were hoping to actually get some seats inside the fence, basically on the southern end of the grounds of the White House. But we got there, it was still dark, and the line to get in there to the limited seating stretched all the way past the Washington Monument and disappeared into the darkness. So here I am, a disabled vet, wanting only to be able to sit down, and that was not going to happen. So that was kind of funky for us. We ended up floating around the Ellipse area, found some temporary seating just up on a stone wall way high on a ridge where the Washington Monument is, a kind of a promontory up there. And so we heard the remarks, the president is always late. And as my back was thumping on that cold day, eventually we heard him say, and now we're going to go to the Capitol and let our voices be peacefully heard. Now, the BBC and the mainstream media have doctored that tape to have him say all kinds of things. I'm surprised that they don't have him yodeling on there or something. They have the ability to do that sort of stuff. But it's just, it's just the duplicitous nature of the mainstream media. And Sharon looks at me and I look at her, and there were people around us that we had just met and said, we're going? So now it appeared that the president was going to speak at the Capitol as well. Most Americans don't know that Mayor Bowser of Washington, D.C. had been spending weeks issuing permits for conservative and Christian speakers to speak on the grounds of the Capitol building that very day after the president made his remarks, and there had been temporary stages erected for that purpose. Many people that headed down towards the Capitol were going there because they wanted to hear those folks. Once we knew that the president might speak because he said we, and then we coupled that with the idea that maybe we could hear some other speakers, let's go toddling down. So it was the longest mile of my life walking down Constitution Avenue. I mean, people were passing me with strollers. I'm hobbling like Franken Sr., walking down there. But we got down there, and we actually spent the afternoon at a place called the Peace Monument. It was originally called the Navy Monument. How appropriate. But it was not even on the Capitol grounds. That's where we spent most of our day. We never went on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol until after we had heard through people at the crowd that day that the Capitol had been emptied of all of the senators and congressmen. We figured, hey, the certification is over. And I would say to most people, if you claim that you knew the certification process prior to that day and hearing all the twaddle afterwards, you're fibbing. Because nobody really knew. I didn't know what was actually going on. But they were gone. It was done. Our guy didn't win. Hey, that's fine. And there were people up on the inaugural balcony taking the happy snaps and selfies. And, we went shoulder to shoulder with people, waddled up the steps, went up there, took a couple of selfies. The government's own closed-circuit television video, which, of course, exonerates me of doing anything wrong, and which was never shown to the jury, blocked by the prosecutors and the judge, documents our stay up there, taking pictures at just a few seconds past 5 minutes in total. And yet, the prosecutors would later use this as documentation, though never shown, of me doing all kinds of things, like grabbing shields from policemen and punching people out. Absolutely not true, of course, but hey, why would you let the facts get in the way of a good yarn spun by the DOJ? Now, I was arrested later on with no evidence of wrongdoing, and in fact, no actual investigation ever having been conducted on me prior to the issuance of an arrest warrant and the direction of a SWAT team with an armored vehicle and a couple dozen body armor clad thugs with M4 automatic rifles attacking our farm. I had to sit there and watch, helplessly chained up, as they very nearly murdered Sharon on the front steps of our humble little abode here. All of this for the circus sideshow arrest, whose foundation was an absolute lie. I was imprisoned in solitary confinement and tortured for a government and media lie. In terms of sheer numbers of days, of course, Tim, I did nothing in terms of time in that dungeon in which they held me, sometimes in total darkness. But they pushed me to the physical limits, I'll tell you, with the torture. And they had great plans for more of that before our plucky attorney was able to get me out of there. One of the things that I should mention is when they attacked our farm here, I volunteered to be part of a 3-hour interview with the FBI. Some would call it the Gestapo interrogation. And I had nothing to fear because I was innocent. I hadn't done anything wrong. The FBI, I mean, these are nice people, right? They didn't know anything about me, of course. And in fact, for months later, while I was still in prison, they denied knowledge that I actually worked for the FBI at one time. So that shows you how little they knew about me, and they didn't care. They didn't care. But the point here is that I answered all of their questions. Most defense attorneys would say, don't talk without a lawyer present. They did stumble through reading the Miranda rights, and I did say, so you're going to get me an attorney? To which they just laughed. But we went ahead anyway. Now, the lead FBI guy was surreptitiously filming all of this with a camera, or perhaps it was his phone hanging around his neck like he would hang a pork chop around a kid's neck so the dog would play with him. That's probably what his parents did. But be that as it may, through discovery, we got to see this video before it was removed from the Deloitte application that was supposed to hold all of the discovery. We got that, and we got the transcript. And what was really funny is this was a little bit like the Keystone Cops kind of an operation. For people that are not old enough to understand that, just think of it as a bumbling kind of a clown car. And it was interesting because after I was out of prison and we were seeing this discovery, the FBI special agent was in contact, texting back and forth with the DOJ prosecutors. And he held his phone up in front of the camera that was hanging around his neck. I was literally reading their mail before we went to trial. And I could see what was going on, and the duplicitousness and the lies and the things that they were planning as we went to that kangaroo court. So that's kind of a funny little development there. And over a year later, when we did go to court, the FBI special agents and their civilian witnesses perjured themselves on the witness stand. I'm sure I'm not the only J6er that went through that. But as Sharon said, I have the documentation of all of that. The people that were tried with me, all members of the Oath Keepers, you see, they were locked away. Their only access to anything called discovery, whether it was real evidence or generated phony evidence generated by the government, was to be able to get on some janky government computers once in a while that they were able to see under guard in prison. I, however, could go through all of this stuff, not only the things that the government had produced against me and the things that we had produced to defend me, actual truth, but I got to see all the stuff that was going to be brought against them too. I would dare say that I knew the evidence and the non-evidence in support of their case better than anybody else that would enter that courtroom, maybe even better than their own defense attorneys. And I will tell you right now that I saw nothing there, nor was there anything presented at trial that proved that they were guilty of anything. Oh, yeah, maybe a couple of them walked through an open door into the Capitol. That was documented. But that's not what they were charged with. They were charged with things like seditious conspiracy, as I was. These were the kinds of wackadoodle charges. Again, from what I saw, they're not guilty of a single thing. It was all a lie to further the political agenda of the prosecutors and others, to boost their own careers and even line their pockets. Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, I was just going to say also that there's an American social scientist that I like a lot named Keon West, who said, the moment you allow someone to lie and make money and face no consequences, the obvious result is that they will lie and make money and face no consequences. So the DOJ illegally, that's right, illegally, they broke the law, attacked us relentlessly. Not only at trial, but even when we achieved victory, not total victory, but some victory at trial. And we were the first to do that. They were 65-0, the prosecutors were, and the DOJ. 65-0 in getting convictions against anybody charged with J6 who had the temerity to go to a jury trial inside the swamp of D.C. But we did have some victories. And after that, boy, they turned it up. They canceled my military health and medical coverage. They canceled my retirement payments. They did a lot of stuff. And it was a real rough journey that we were on, Sharon and I. And the Lord is the one who brought us through it all.
So I wanted to maybe just go back a teeny tiny bit. So when our home was raided, like Tom mentioned, he did this 3-hour voluntary interview. He was very honest in that interview, but they took him off to jail anyway.
And accused him of being a fugitive.
Yeah, exactly. And so he was held in pretrial detention for 53 days, 49 days in solitary confinement, where he was tortured in different kinds of ways. I'm not going to talk about that in detail because, Tom goes into a lot of detail about that in the book. However, in those 53 days, I do want to mention one incident because we've never really talked about this before publicly, and I think it's time we need to talk about it, and here it is. So Tom was in jail, and I couldn't believe what was happening, didn't know what was going on. I'm desperately trying to find an attorney. I found one. Now, I had eventually let this first attorney go and hired our second attorney, Mr. David Fisher, who was amazing, wonderful. But this was before David Fisher. So I hired the first attorney, and he took our case. And the very first, he had to schedule a time to go meet with Tom in person at the jail. You can't just walk in there, especially because of COVID. But regardless of COVID, you can't just walk in. You have to schedule these things. So he had scheduled a time. And Tom was looking forward to his very first in-person meeting with his attorney. He's like, get me out of here type of thing. So anyway, the day that he's supposed to meet with his attorney, what happens? Well, 2 U.S. Marshals come to Tom's cell, and they take him out, and they chain him up. They chain his wrists. They chain him around the waist. They chain his ankles. I think before that he had to put on a different colored jumpsuit or something like that. But anyway, Tom's protesting. He's like, what are we doing? I'm supposed to be with my attorney. He's like, no, you're coming with us. So they took him out on purpose, I think, the day he was scheduled to meet with his attorney, and they took him for a ride. Well, they ultimately took him to Harrisonburg, Virginia, where he sat for 4 hours and nothing happened. Nothing happened to him in Harrisonburg. They didn't do anything in Harrisonburg. Why did they take him there? They did nothing in Harrisonburg. But what they did do on the way to Harrisonburg was they pulled off on a country road. They kicked him out of this van. Tom fell face down into the gravel, got gravel in his eyes. He's laying there in the dirt. One of the U.S. Marshals spread his feet apart as they would go, although he still has chains around his ankle, and repeatedly kicked him in the nuts, in the balls. Tom doesn't even know exactly how many times, but it was a lot. It was extremely painful, and he kept doing that, and he kept mocking Tom until Tom passed out from the pain. And eventually, I guess he came to, and he was in the van, and he went to Harrisonburg and came back. I want to know, we've never talked about this before, but I want to know this. Now, we have the names of those 2 U.S. Marshals. We've never mentioned them. We didn't even mention them in the book. We left that out. We tried to show a little bit of grace. But we know who they are. And I want to know this. who ordered these two thugs to beat Tom into unconsciousness? Tom has zero criminal history, didn't commit any crimes on J6 or before. He's 66 years old at the time, a service-connected disabled veteran, honorably served his country, so that these thugs have the freedom to kick him in the balls, and beat him into unconsciousness. I want to know, these are my questions. Who ordered them to beat up Tom? And by the way, I love law enforcement. I respect law enforcement. I've always been a huge supporter of law enforcement. But these guys, I don't care if they were following orders, they were thugs. They enjoyed what they were doing to Tom, and what they did is wrong. We didn't enter the Capitol. We didn't, participate in any violence. I want to know, are these two people still employed? Are their actions illegal and or criminal? They should be. Will anybody ever be held accountable for these actions? Does anybody care? Will this be the type of thing the new J6 committee under Barry Loudermilk ever investigates? Do they care what happened to J6ers? And I think they've done some great work so far, but there's so much more to be done. I know that, my impression is that they're looking into things kind of Trump related and maybe higher level related, but do they actually care about what happened to people like Tom and I? Did other J6ers suffer this same type of abuse or maybe worse? Does our current government care, and how is this allowed to happen in this country? And if people don't think, that's one reason Tom wrote this book. There's so many people we've talked to that have told us, well, that can't happen in America. I'm telling you, it did happen. It did happen in America. This type of communist treatment where real criminals are being let out of jails to roam free and commit crimes over and over and over again. And these jails are being emptied out so that they can fill them up with people who they disagree with politically or ideologically, like me and Tom. That's what it seems like to me. I believe J6 was a preview for what will come if the Democrats and the communists ever get back into power. But I'd like some answers to those questions. And it's very painful for me to talk about that incident, and like we've never talked about it before. I feel that we do have the freedom now to talk about it, and I feel that we must talk about it because people need to know that this is what it was done to innocent people like Tom and I. So I'm sorry, I just had to say that.
No,
Tim,
it's true, and I'll say this too, real quick. It's actually when I look at the story of what Tom went through in captivity, there's a real demonic aspect when they mock him for his Christian faith as well. That also really stood out to me. Besides the physical torture, the spiritual, there was certainly a spiritual warfare element there. Where people who had power over prisoners mocked their Christian faith as they cried out. So that also really disturbed me, and I think that's something that also really should be held accountable as well.
Well, we feel the same way, and Tim, we're so very grateful to be on this program with you. And Sharon did talk about the reasons that we wrote the book. Certainly, we want to glorify God because there are a lot of absolutely indisputable events that were miracles that brought us through this. But we wanted to have an historical record, and what you're doing, documenting the stories of J6ers, is very important too. You're the one who's really out there trying to make a complete record so that people will know what actually happened. It's true. Time and time again, we see people that say, I never knew. Or those who have followed us a little bit will say, well, I talked to my sister and she says, oh, he's just lying. He's just grifting. That couldn't happen here. But in a constitutional republic where personal rights are guaranteed, where the law is inviolable, yes, it really does happen. Because for us, we found out that you're guilty until proven innocent. And then even when you can prove your innocence, you end up being tried in a place like Washington, D.C. I have nothing against the citizenry of Washington, D.C. I was actually born in the Come As You Are section of Northeast Washington and spent my early years in my grandmother's boarding house. We had pretty humble circumstances, but no place in our country has been propagandized like Washington, D.C. The electorate there voted 95% against President Trump in the elections, against conservative values and against Christian values. Well, it's one of the reasons why we presented time and time again the results of professional surveys to the judge to show him nobody's going to get an honest, fair trial in here. The results were astounding, Tim. We do talk about some of them in the book. There was really no chance that we were going to get a fair trial. And yet, when I talk about how the Lord brought us through, how on earth did I get so many not guilty verdicts? Well, I believe the Lord had a hand in that. Yes, I took the stand in my own defense. Yes, Sharon took the stand. Yes, we had a great lawyer who was brought to us by God. That's a whole separate story. And we did our best to present only the facts. But it didn't seem like it was going to help us all that much when the things that were said by the prosecution and then disproved were simply repeated before the jury broke to go and enter into their deliberations. So there were a lot of things that were going on there. We know that the Lord was with us. And in the years that we have left, we're not sure what God wants us to do. You would think that, hey, we dodged the bullet, we should just slink away with our tail between our legs. But this book is part of something that we prayed about and we felt had to happen. You know, I began writing this thing almost as soon as I got out of that pit. Sharon was nursing me back to health, and it was tough. But we were so oppressed, and it was clear that the government would do anything, no matter how heinous, how evil, how wicked, how lawless it might be. We thought the FBI might trump up something else to come back and drag me away. So I began to write while it was still fresh in my head. And this book, and all of your listeners and all who might read this book, need to know that this was written in a linear fashion. I didn't wait until we were in the warm, sunny sunshine of renewed freedom to say, well, let me tell you about what happened to me. No, I started at the very beginning, including with notes and sketches and things that I had smuggled out of prison to Sharon. She kept them, as any good, loving wife would have, thinking, I might not see this guy again. These are the last words of my darling. And so I had those things, and there was a lot that went into this. And so the agony that we go through and all the good stuff. There is a really brilliant writer and social commentator named Diana West, who I've come to know just a little bit. On her Substack account, she wrote a very nice piece about January 6th and the things that are coming out slowly to prove this Fedsurrection that so many of us from the inside identified it as being. And she said some really nice things about my book. And she said, American citizens need to read for themselves, and through Tom's vivid, enraging, engaging, and uplifting recollections, feel what it was like to be an innocent man beset by the federal behemoth, starting a cold winter night when the U.S. government staged an armed raid on their farm in Virginia. So, clearly she got it. I mean, I can barely read those words without getting too emotional to continue reading, because she understood. I wanted to take you, Tim. I wanted to take Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public by the hand and say, let me show you in smell-o-vision reality what it's like every step of the way, and the pitfalls and the pratfalls and the evil and the oppression and the anxiety. And you know what? And the laughter and the joy. Sharon is a hero to me through all of this, because not only did she never give up, but she said early on, she says, you know what? They're not going to steal our joy. I was at the time saying, these people just suck. And she says, they're not going to steal our joy. And you know what? We tried to laugh every single day. I don't know how we did it. When this all happened, I was a youngish 66 with a song in my heart that would get up in the morning and say, I'm going to go up to the barn and build something. And now I'm a very, very old, broken down 71. 3 operations later, with another one coming up, endured since my time as a guest of the state. And we don't know what the future holds, but we laid out our trek, including the joyous finish that we had in federal court this very year, people will say, well, gosh, everybody got pardoned. Everything is okay. First and foremost, we need to dispel that. Everything is not okay. People's lives are shattered. There are people that are homeless. And Sharon and I, now that we are able to get out on the road, we've met some very nice people, and we've met some very nice people who are J6ers. And the stories that they have told us are heartbreaking. So we met one particular gent when we were invited by the Constitutional Conservatives of Charleston, Mamie Rand and her band of really wonderful people down in Charleston. We spoke at the Citadel, which is it's the West Point of the South for people that don't know. And a gentleman came up to me later and he said, Tom, you say things I can't talk about yet. And so I don't know whether you could say we're writing this for everybody. We try to stay in our own lane and write about what we know. But by golly, we do have the evidence. And whether it'll go anywhere, whether anybody will take this on and say, this is a great book, or it belongs to the trash heap of history, if anyone is ever held to account for the bad things that they have done, we don't know. But we had to put it down. And in January of this year, the same judge that blocked Brady evidence from us, blocked witnesses from coming to testify on my behalf, blocked the jury from hearing all kinds of things, including seeing the transcript of that 3-hour Gestapo interrogation. That same judge looked me dead in the eye. Instead of throwing out the last funky charge against me, the last funky one, which was allegedly removing selfies from a text message string from somebody who wasn't even convicted of anything with January 6th, instead of doing that, he said to me, Mr. Caldwell, in the end, the government has failed to meet its burden of proof of your guilt. My ruling is time served, go home, good luck. That's it. Yeah. That's it. And so I got a commutation.
So that happened on January 10th, 2025 this year, 10 days before the inauguration. So we sort of, that was Tom's sentencing that had been delayed for like 2.5 years or something like that. I mean, it was 1 year and 8 months, I think it was. Yeah. But anyway, it was delayed a long time. And finally went to sentencing. I guess they had to fit that in before Trump got inaugurated.
That's right. I think I may have set the Guinness Book of World Records mark for the longest time for a federal prisoner to have been found guilty of something and then go to sentencing. Normally it happens within a couple of months. But like Sharon pointed out, it was over 2 years. Yeah. Delay after delay after delay after delay. We couldn't understand.
But it was God. It was God. I know it was.
Absolutely it was. Yeah. And we'll talk about that in the book. And, Tim, you've already read about this, but I will tell your listeners, it was amazing the pressure that they brought on us. And yet, when we thought we couldn't take another step forward, it was our Lord and Savior who carried us. Yes, I'm that guy. I'm one of those people because I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And maybe our relationship with our Lord and Savior wouldn't be what it is now if we hadn't gone through this. But he kept giving us little morsels. And I talk in the book about what was he trying to instill in me. It's not a matter of I was a bad guy and he's trying to make me a good guy. No, I was always a good guy. But what things did I have to go through? And in the book, I will tell people I didn't go back and change anything in chapter 1. But the guy that wrote chapter 1, although it's Thomas Caldwell, is not the same guy that wrote chapter 14. Because there were a lot of things that had to happen. And during all these delays, things that you just wouldn't expect happened, like the Supreme Court. Yeah. The Supreme Court came down with the Fisher case. That was one of the things that they had hung on me, yeah. that weird conspiracy. Yeah,
and just maybe just for people who don't know, one of the other questions we always get is, what were you charged with? So it's a long story, but ultimately these were Tom's original charges. They charged him with going into the Capitol and doing all that stuff. Well, then they had to oops, I guess he really didn't do that. So
he had to invent something else.
So, yeah, they were wrong in all the original ones. But, so about a year after they arrested him, they charged him, along with the Oath Keepers, with 5 felonies. I'll just run through them real quick. Seditious conspiracy was 1. Conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Conspiracy to prevent officers from performing their duties. Obstruction of an official proceeding, and tampering with evidence. So those 5. So the big victory that we had at the end of his jury trial, which was a 10-week-long jury trial in D.C. with 4 other members of the Oath Keepers, Tom was found not guilty or acquitted of all 3 conspiracy charges, the first 3, which were the most serious charges. So that, for me, I felt that was a huge win, because there were already rumblings that the Supreme Court would most likely look at that obstruction charge. And I just felt in my heart that they were going to say that charge didn't apply. So I felt like the not guilty verdict on the biggest 3 charges was a huge win for us. So then Tom was found guilty of the obstruction of an official proceeding and tampering with evidence. And then, of course, the Supreme Court ruled in our favor. The obstruction charge went away. And ultimately, he just had the 1 charge remaining for allegedly taking down 11 selfie photos of J6 from 1 text message, which was silly because all of the original photos still on his cell phone with the original timestamps. Those same photos, he texted to a bunch of different people, including the one guy on the Facebook Messenger that he, allegedly took them down from. He retexted not just those 11, but 39. That text message is still on his phone. Tom, that last charge of tampering with evidence, says that you supposedly tampered with, deleted, changed, altered, mutilated, something to keep something from a grand jury. Well, first of all, we never expected to be charged with anything at all. We don't know how grand juries operate. Why would we hide anything from a grand jury when we felt that we had done absolutely nothing wrong? So we had no expectation there. We were going to be the subject of. We had no clue we were going to be the subject of any type of investigation. But all of the photos we still have, nothing was destroyed. We have the originals, and it bothers me because people on the first J6 Select Committee with Liz Cheney and all that, they destroyed thousands of hours of witness testimony.
Yep.
But are they charged with tampering with evidence? They actually destroyed stuff. Tom didn't. So it's just the unfairness, the double standards are sickening. I just wanted to. So anyway, by the time we went to sentencing, Tom only had that 1 tampering with evidence charge left, which should have been dismissed, but it wasn't. But we went from when they first arrested Tom, they, in writing, wanted to put him in jail for the rest of his life. That when you add the terrorist enhancements that they were fooling around with, those were eventually dropped. But, all that stuff at the beginning, they, in writing, said, you better take a plea deal because otherwise, you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life, basically is what they put into writing. They threatened him with that. Then after he was convicted of the 2 charges, they said, well, in their sentencing memo, well, now it's 14 years. We're going to give you 14 years. And then even when that one went away from the Supreme Court, the DOJ prosecutor said, well, still, taking down 11 selfie photos, oh my gosh, crime of the century. You still need to go away for 4 years. I mean, that was their recommendation. It was nuts. It was nuts how much they went after this man and over nothing. And the only other thing I want to say about this whole sentencing crap, well, I do want to say 2 things. One is the current justice system, as I think most of us know now who've gone through something related to J6, it's not working for your average American. And I think most people don't know, because I didn't know. I was really before J6, I was totally naive about how our court system works, how the so-called justice system works, or as it really doesn't work. I was totally naive about how sentencing works. I didn't know how the BOP works. I know nothing about any of that. And my eyes have been opened. I'm glad that they have been opened. I hope that more Americans' eyes will be open, because most people, unless you've been through something like this, you don't know how it works, and it doesn't work well. And so we need to make changes. I just wanted to mention that, Tom did have all these delays before he finally got sentenced, and really bothered me was, okay, so went through this trial. Tom actually had a really, really good result. I like to say I believe Tom had the best result of any J6er that dared to go to a jury trial. Now, some people disagree with me on that, but I say, given the seriousness of the charges, who else had this kind of result? So I think he got a good result. But the thing was, even after that, with the 2 remaining charges, then, as you know, Tim, the DOJ puts together what's called a pre-sentencing report. Well, what I didn't know, and I'm trying to find it here. Oh, yeah, I know where it is. The pre-sentencing report, for people who don't know, this is when the DOJ, they just put together this thing where they come up with why they're recommending, in Tom's case, 14 years in prison. The first part, or part of the pre-sentence report, consists of an offense conduct section. And that section reads, it says, the information contained in the section was obtained from three sources. It was obtained from, 1, the various indictments filed in this case. And as you know, indictments are indictments, but it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So the information in them is obtained from, 1, the various indictments filed in this case, 2, the government's opposition to defendants' motions for judgment of acquittal, so just their opposition, the government's opposition, and 3, additional information provided by the government. What? So not guilty verdicts in a jury trial of people who are not Tom's peers, that DC jury, those are not Tom's peers. Those not guilty verdicts meant something. They meant something, but not to the government. So what happened is when they write up this PSR, they just take information from the indictments, from their own arguments, and from other information provided by the government. And when you read that PSR and their recommendation of that 14 years, it read like we had never had a trial, like we had never gotten not guilty verdicts. It didn't take into account any of the results of the trial. And I'm like, why did we bother going to trial? Why did we hire a lawyer? Why do we go through 10 weeks of a trial? Why do we bother getting these victories when the government can charge you with anything? And then in their sentencing report, they talk like he conspired. No, the jury said he didn't. So that's one thing. And then as we found out later, when we finally came down to his sentencing for just the one charge, where they still wanted to lock him up for 4 years, still using, all these other lame arguments that he'd done all the stuff when we'd already determined that he hadn't. We were told by a Bureau of Prisons consultant that if Tom goes back to prison, if he's sentenced to any prison time, you would think for his one and only charge of allegedly removing selfie photographs from one text message, then I think most people would agree that's like that's an extremely non-violent crime. Okay. That's a non-violent crime. Oh my gosh. I removed photos. Okay. Which, were innocent, but you would think that he would go to like a camp, a low security camp. Oh no. We learned that the PSR, the pre-sentence report, is the Bureau of Prisons Bible. That is the Bible.
It's the only thing they look at.
It's the only thing they look at. They look at your original charges. They don't care what the results of the jury trial was. So Tom would have gone to either a medium or maybe even a maximum security prison because of his original charges. Why did we even bother going through this trial and proving he was not guilty?
Yeah, I probably would have gone to Florence out in Colorado, which is Supermax. So
it's this system, and I've talked to so many J6ers who want prison reform, and they want we want to reform this, and obviously our judicial system needs major reforms because we have all these activist judges and prosecutors who are not doing what they should be doing. But there's so much that needs reform. I almost don't know where to start, but doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should try to do it. But I'll tell you what, this system, not only is it rigged, but it's just so dishonest, and they can do whatever they want to do to you. And it doesn't have to make any logical sense. And that is so scary. So I'm sorry. I just had to say that because the way the system works is wrong.
Right. And we had no way of knowing. And Tim, we're almost preaching to the choir here because you have seen this stuff. You've seen the seamy side of all this for yourself. But people that are listening to these wonderful recordings that you make, these historical recordings, may not know. And they may not know things like the prosecutors and the judges operate under a thing called absolute immunity, which means that they can lie and cheat and steal and fabricate evidence, and they can intimidate witnesses, and they can do all this stuff, and they can never be held accountable. never be held accountable. They can't be prosecuted for that. They're not going to be just barred for that. They have a license to kill. I mean, 007 doesn't have something like this. They can destroy lives and just go on. Now, a lot of people probably are like us. We think that we're just average folk, and we are. And they're probably thinking, well, we got the new administration, we got Pam Blondie, we got Kash Patel, and we're hopeful for them, and we're prayerful that they're going to get things done and turn this ship around. But, we're not seeing the kinds of actions that we would like to see. And we battled them, Tim, as you well know, for over 4 years. When I say them, I'm talking about the corrupt Biden government, that wackazoid that they had as the attorney general who looked like Skeletor out of an old 1970s anime cartoon. And the various characters that I try to breathe some life into in the book so that people can see how bad this thing is. You really got to take a look at the bad guys. You have to put some flesh on that skeleton just so that people can see these are people that have a real problem. And we battled them for 4 years, like I said, and in those same 4 years, similar cases, similar frame-ups played out literally hundreds of times in our former land of the free and home of the brave. The Fedsurrection is what they call it. It was touted in the media as the largest, the most extensive, and the most important FBI investigation in history. Well, but instead of protecting the American people and the Constitution, it was there to protect a coup d'etat. It trashed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We know that. It crushed MAGA, and in so doing, consolidated and expanded leftist socialist counter-state power. It's important to realize, and I know that you do, Tim, that counter-state operations like what we're referring to are always attacks on we the people. Ours was a coordinated military and intelligence mechanism of entrapment and pressure and hate. It ensnared and ruined, some people say, well, only a few thousand people. They downplay it, but everything is okay now because of the pardons. But the media fomented and continued that craziness. There are people now that if they want to know something about my case, if they go on the internet, what do they see? They see the press releases from the Department of Justice from the very first year. And, it's just all of this action and the cruel and inhumane sentences that came down. It just makes you want to grind your teeth.
But I just want to say we are very, very grateful to President Trump for the pardons and the commutations. And I do believe that President Trump knows more than anybody else what this lawfare is like that we've gone through, what the J6ers have gone through, and he did absolutely the right thing, and we're so grateful and thankful to him, and especially this Christmas time. I mean, just this is the first Christmas so many people will be home with their families. Many J6ers home with their families, and I know there's a lot of recovery. It still needs to happen for many people, but I'm still hopeful and optimistic. I try to be hopeful and optimistic. So I also want to say, so we've been blabbing. Tom and I have been blabbing here quite a bit. And you've been very gracious to allow us to do that. Do you have questions for us that maybe we can answer, or well, things that might be clear? Or?
Oh yeah, no, sure. The I actually quite often enjoy letting people talk as long as they want because, people go so many years not talking a lot, and so much gets pent up. I actually think it's beneficial for people to talk as long as they can, uninterrupted sometimes. I always let people talk either as short as they want or as detailed as they want, because it's their story ultimately. But yeah, I mean, here's a couple things I'd like to really ask. First off, you'd hinted at it a few times. Please, please give a little bit more about your background so people can really appreciate who you are, Tom. You're a veteran, but I mean, you really had, whether it's Navy, the FBI, your whole life really seems to be one of public service. And that's really what makes your prosecution, all the more egregious, really. So, I mean, I'd like you to expand a little bit more on how much of your life you gave to your country, not just your time, but in many cases, even your own health, your own body. Who really is Tom the Man?
Well, thanks, Tim. I grew up a farm boy. We moved out to the Shenandoah Valley in the 1960s, and I left here having earned an ROTC scholarship, Navy ROTC scholarship. I've learned that NROTC, Navy Reserve Officer Training Corps, that actually is an acronym. It stands for Navy Rips Off Tom Caldwell. And so I went to the University of Louisville and, had an okay career there and was commissioned in the United States Navy and was sent overseas. My first 4 years were in the Far East. I went to the Philippines, where they had a very active insurgency, by the way, at that time. The Marcos government was in power, and the communist Chinese were supporting the Muslim rebels that wanted to kill Americans and kill the Philippine constabulary and get Marcos out of there, and that's what I was thrust into. So totally unprepared for that as a guy right out of college, and so there were some adventures there, and I came out of there twice promoted and came back to our country at the tail end of the Jimmy Carter administration, where even though I was a full lieutenant, you go from ensign to lieutenant JG to lieutenant, even though I had made that, our country was in such bad shape that I couldn't get a credit card, I couldn't qualify for a car loan, and actually had to sleep on the floor of my office in an old wooden frame building at the Naval Air Station Anacostia, right outside of Washington, D.C. And I worked my way into changing my designator to Naval Intelligence, where I spent the bulk of my 19 years, 2 months, and 28 days on active duty. And it was extremely rewarding. Even though we had some excitement in the Philippines, I tell people mine was not a John Wayne career. It was a McHale's Navy career, not meaning that we were all goofballs. We did have some fun, but naval intelligence, sitting at a console, doing fusion intelligence and satellite imagery interpretation, that's not the glamorous stuff. That's not being in the aircraft, even though I did finish my career with 3 tours at Naval Air Station Miramar back in those days, Top Gun, yada, yada, and all that. But I was pleased to do what my country called on me to do. And I found it very rewarding. And I would have stayed as long as they would have me. Actually, I guess I did. The Clinton administration decided that they were going to draw down the active duty forces, so I got caught up in all of that. So I was put out before I put on full commander and before I made 20 years. But, anyway, so I moved on to the civilian land in those times. People were not that happy with military folks. Nowadays, if you have a security clearance and you can fog a mirror, you can get yourself a nice job with the federal government. It was not that case then. So I went back to, at that time, my first love, which was radio. I had worked my way through University of Louisville by being the late night DJ on WAKY and some other stations there, playing what they now call classic rock. We didn't call it that. Those times we called it rock and roll. And so I went back to that here in the Shenandoah Valley. I also did football and basketball, high school and small college play-by-play on the radio and the local cable. And I met the woman of my dreams who sits here on my right, and everything changed. And so I decided that I needed to find a way to support her in a manner to which I would like her to become accustomed. And I went back to school and reinvented myself as an Oracle developer and started to work for the U.S. Coast Guard. And I figured that was a much nicer job than working out in the industry because, as you pointed out, and I would tell all your listeners, I did not give you a cue card on this to set that up, but I did want to continue to serve my country. And it was the only way that I could think of to do that. So I had stints with the Coast Guard. Sharon and I actually created our own software consulting company, and we turned to the government again. and we worked contracts. I was actually on site working at the U.S. Army Personnel Command, the Drug Enforcement Administration, Housing and Urban Development. I later went on and was actually a GS civilian for the FBI, a GS-13. And stepping back here as a contractor, I also worked for what I considered at the time to be one of the most corrupt portions of the Department of Justice, the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys, 7th and E Street Northwest. You talk about some real criminals. These were the money people.
Oh, my goodness.
And, oh, my gosh, the things that they would do.
It's interesting, and we won't go into too much detail. This is fairly long time ago, but it's interesting. I always worked in private industry pretty much, but then, we did do this stint. We had our own software company, and both, we're contractors to these various agencies and government operations. And I'll tell you what, it's interesting as a contractor, especially when you run your own business, seeing the way the federal government operates, because there is a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse. Let me just say that. And we observed some of that. And we were trying to make things more transparent in what we were doing for them in terms of reporting on various monies and where the monies went and blah, blah, blah. And, I'll tell you what, we got a lot of pushback. Even back then, back in I don't know when that was, a long time ago. People that were entrenched in government and worked in these government places for forever and ever and ever, they didn't want that transparency back then, and they don't want it now. So, stuff's been going on a long time with let's hide the money and get more money and, all that stuff. So
yeah, I saw that even on active duty, and that was one of the things that pushed us. We said, you know what, we can do it better. There are people that they need some outside help. Maybe they're not up to speed with the latest software. And we can go in there and we can attach to the databases. We can show them what can happen, and we can make things operate more smoothly. And won't that be grand? And as Sharon said, people didn't like that so much because they had their own little fiefdoms.
The rice bowls, don't take out of my rice bowl.
Yeah.
We're not trying to take anybody's rice bowl. We're just trying to show people where the money's going.
That's right. A million here, a million there. Everett Dirksen said, pretty soon you're talking about real money. Yeah. And so anyhow, when it was time to set that aside, we were here on the farm. Sharon was working. She was working for our local county in the office of the Registrar of Elections, and she really enjoyed it. And I wasn't going to step all over that and ask her to step away. But so I'm working here on the farm, and I said, I just want to give some more. And that's how I went down and applied for a job with the FBI, and I got that. I didn't stay with that all that long, not because I didn't like it, not because I saw a lot of crooks, not because I didn't like the people that I was working with that were not crooks, but rather because my disabilities were catching up with me. And it was important for me to go and get those taken care of. And I had a bad spinal surgery. And
you couldn't work there anymore after that.
Yeah, so I spent the next 5, 6, 7 years just in recovery, trying to learn to walk again and all that kind of stuff. So otherwise I would have stayed, continuing to work for the government. I love our country. I know you do too, Tim. Sharon certainly loves this land of ours. We do want to give back. Even though all of this stuff has happened, even though I will tell you that there was a moment when I was there in prison and I was just so beaten down, literally, figuratively, that I said right out loud, if I ever get out of here, the first thing I'm going to do on the farm is dig a hole. I'm going to put in all the medals, all the letters of commendation, my service record, all the memories, the fair winds and following seas plaques that you get at all of your commands. I'm going to put them in a big hole. I'm going to set them on fire because all the things that I did, the sacrifice of my innocence, my physicality, all of that meant nothing to my country and the people that I served. And I chewed on that for a while, and then I realized it wasn't my country that was doing it. It was a bunch of creepos who were non-elected, who were bureaucrats, who were haters, who had power, and they wielded it in a cruel fashion with incredible relish. And those were the people that were doing it, and those were the people that we were going to fight. I've heard a lot of things said about why you want to keep going. I heard quitting is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Well, we never were going to quit because to quit would just let them do whatever they wanted to do to us. Many people took a plea deal, and I have no problem with that. The pressure that was coming down, people could look at that and say, do I want my family destroyed? Do I want the pressure on them? And still end up going away for 20 years or something like that. Or do I take a plea deal? Now, early on, there was some rumblings about offering me a plea deal, but we never considered doing it.
No, we never considered doing it. And you know, and I think with us, again, our story is a little bit different here in that, like I mentioned earlier, because, you know, I was here when the Oath Keepers camped on a property. I know what did and didn't happen. The DOJ tried to say, oh, you were planning J6. Well, no, nobody was planning J6. Nobody even talked about J6. Why? One of the reasons was nobody even knew in November, 8th or 9th or 10th or whatever it was, 14th, I don't know, that there was going to be a January 6th with President Trump speaking at a rally in D.C. Nobody even knew that. Nobody was planning anything.
Yeah, he didn't announce that till December.
It was, December 18th. So it was like, to me, it was like people were excited about going to the Million MAGA March and excited to see people and meet people. And it was, to me, very much a social gathering. So that was stupid. But, you know, I was here. I was with Tom in J6. Obviously, we both like to talk. We like to talk to other people. We like to talk to each other.
We like to talk to people who like to talk.
We communicate pretty well. So, you know, I don't have to guess about what Tom did or didn't do. I know what Tom did or didn't do. I know the truth. I don't have to guess. And so I don't have to assume. You know what they say about assume? When you assume something, that makes an ass out of you and me. Well, I'll tell you what. The FBI, when they arrested Tom, assumed an awful lot of things, and they later had egg on their face because they got it completely wrong. And I think it's another reason they doubled down on Tom, because they were embarrassed that they had gotten so much wrong about him. So I don't know, but it's I know the truth, and so that's one reason people, oh, you're just standing by your man. Well, yeah, I am, but I am because I was there with him side by side, you know, for the whole thing. And so I know, and I know the truth, and I know this is wrong. And, you know, we were just going to fight it, and we did as best we could.
Yeah. You know, one of the things also, Tim, that was really made me grind my teeth in the trial proceedings, if you want to call it that, was the palpable hatred from the prosecutor's table for our country, and specifically for veterans and the U.S. military. There were so many snide comments. There were so many direct accusatory statements when people were on the stand, including yours truly, about they taught you how to hurt and kill people, and that's all you're good for, and you would have thought that the judge would say, order in the court, but that didn't happen. They just pulled this stuff, and
I don't know. Like you said in your book, I didn't go to a hurt and kill people school. No, he didn't. He didn't have that training. And I just think it's weird. It's kind of weird to me how some people, at least they seem to have absolutely no accurate knowledge of what, certain jobs are in the military, what the military is really like, what you do in the military, how it operates. Either they were feigning stupidity, or they were just totally ignorant. And maybe that's because nobody in their family has ever served. I don't know. But it was very surprising. They just seemed to be totally ignorant and like Tom said, not complimentary of people who served in the military, and just made all these assumptions about, well, you must have been, a highly, not everybody's a Navy SEAL. Okay. That's a very elite group, and not everybody's like trained in all this, advanced, on the ground warfare. I mean, Tom certainly wasn't. So, it's just really kind of weird, the perceptions people have of military, especially if you don't know anybody that's been in it.
Tim, you said something that really struck to the heart of it when you said, this is a demonic thing, and it really is. People say we're in a spiritual war. I wholeheartedly agree. Many people, perhaps most people in this country, don't know that in federal courthouses, you will no longer see a representation of the Ten Commandments. I mean, if any of these people, these prosecutors, were actual Christians, I don't think that they could have broken the ninth commandment with such incredible glee that, thou shalt not bear false witness. Mm-hmm. And also, there's no Bible upon which to put your hand to swear. When they were sending up all of these doggone people to testify in trial, not all of them directed specifically towards me, but whatever, they would say, do you promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? That's it. But there was one clown who, when he got up there to testify, and it's me, finished the sentence without the guy doing a prompting because he wasn't going to prompt. And I said, "So help me God." And I'll tell you what, you would have thought that I had passed gas in church. I mean, look, let me tell you what, I mean, the gasp and the stares of derision from the media sycophants that were 4 deep behind the prosecutors, behind the swinging gates that separated the peanut gallery from the rest of it, and the prosecutor's sneers and all that. And I said it loud and I said it proud. And everything I said was absolutely true. And I think that it helped that I testified on my behalf, because the prosecutors were so intent on painting a false picture, a monstrous portrait of all of the people that were in their crosshairs. And I even in the book, I talk about looking into these people's spaces, and it's like looking into an empty eye. It's like looking into a shark's eyes, like dead eyes. It's like staring into the eyes of a severed doll head that you found in a shotgun shack, in a forest somewhere. And just go, ugh. It's got the appearance of humanity, but there's no humanity inside. There's no compassion. They had passion without compassion. And I'm not sure what we were dealing with, but boy, the hatred in there, you could have shoveled it with a front end loader. And it was a terrible, terrible time. And I'm thinking that we're not the only ones that went through that.
Probably not.
Most people that did choose a trial didn't have to go through 10 and a half weeks of this kind of charade. Usually the proceedings were much shorter, I've been led to believe. But to be hammered this way day after day after day, and we had to spend the night in the no-tell motel down in Crystal City, Virginia, because we couldn't make that 2.5 hour drive all the way back to the farm and 2.5 hours back down. And heaven forbid that I should be late for trial because I'm caught in the traffic on the Beltway, because Judge Ahmed P. Mehta would have thrown me right in the can.
Yeah. One of the advantages, I guess, looking back now, of going through this lengthy trial is that, I'm not super familiar with the details of other J6 defendants' cases, because I'm just not. I mean, I can't follow everybody's case. I can't get into the details, but
Sure.
But one of the advantages, in retrospect, of going through this 10-week-long trial was that, if you either took a plea deal or you had a bench trial, or even if you had a jury trial, a lot of times they were maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days, or maybe a week at the most, not usually 10 weeks. But with 10 weeks, we had a trove of evidence that is in the book. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but where Tom says, look, this exhibit was falsified. This was perjured testimony. This is where the FBI agent recanted, and again, he provides the proof of those things. So it's like we have so much stuff that, and Tom doesn't even put it all in the book. He can't, because the book would have been like double its size. But he tried to pick, some of the big things that were, shown to be a real dirty trick, and shows the proof of how they were a dirty trick. So, we just had more chances for the Department of Justice prosecutors to screw up and provide more. We have more things we can show just because the trial went on longer, and they were so desperate. I mean, they were just so desperate to that they pulled a lot of really dirty stuff, which we were able, most of the time, to uncover to the jury so that they could see that was all BS. Which, thankfully, we were able to, not always, but in most cases, we were really able to uncover it and make them look stupid. So anyway, it's that's one good thing. We've got more evidence, I guess, against them, but that others may. But
we do have this book, and as Sharon told you, the reasons that we did the book. Writers nowadays, they don't really make a lot of money off of a book. And again, that's not the reason that we did it. We would like a lot of people to read it and see what really happened. And Sharon talked to you about that, and see our witnessing and our testimony about the grace and the redemptive power of a loving God. But everybody ends up, if they had to actually pay for an attorney like we did, you end up in not the best financial situation. Like Sharon says, we have so much evidence. I was thinking what we could do is we could offer ourselves up, this would never happen, to go to various law schools around the country for an honorarium, of course, and go and just make a presentation and say, if you have to go into federal court, this is what they're going to do. And show exhibit, and then extracts directly from the trial transcripts and all that stuff. And I was telling Sharon, maybe what we could do is we could get David W. Fisher out of Glen Burnie, Maryland. He was the guy that did such a wonderful job working with us and fighting these creepos from the federal government. Maybe he could go with us. We could take a traveling roadshow and just present this stuff. And it's like, here's the guy who's being attacked, and here's his perspective, and I've got all this stuff. And now Dave will let you know about the legal nuances and what he was thinking. I think it could be compelling.
It very well could be. You know, one of the things, as you mentioned, well, I mean, the remarkable thing about your book, and you know, you had mentioned how I'm collecting all this stuff for history. I mean, that's so true, and for the very reasons you did. I mean, if for no other reason than to see a part of history that's really not been focused on enough, or, you know, you have a very human story, and it's important for people to realize, like, the humanitarian disaster that January 6th was to a lot of people. But your book in particular, I have to say, is so impressive, because you do, as Sharon said, you do bring the receipts, and there are so many citations and sources and footnotes. I wish more J6 defendants would write books like this. I do highly recommend it. If nothing else, people can see just how much, as you just said, like, you could never fit all of it in, because the book would be twice as long. Right. At over 300 pages. Not only is the story compelling, but so is the evidence. And so, yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I recommend people pick up this book so they can realize just how much in just one defendant's case, and largely, I guess more broadly, the Oath Keeper's indictment, in just in one case, or for one person, there can be mountains and mountains of documents exposing government lies or demonstrating falsehoods, perjury, and you name it. And that's on top of the torture. That's on top of the hardship. You've done a phenomenal job, and I really have to, you know, tip my hat. So, I mean, congratulations. And yeah, 100%. And I hope, you know, whether you do a traveling show, or whether you just, you know, go and do speaking tours, I really do hope that, I hope that you don't stay silent. You know, I hope that you continue to talk about this book. I hope that both of you continue, not only, because, I mean, I obviously know, you know, from the past, I know that you've reached out to other defendants, as you said, you know, a lot of people need to tell their stories. And I think that what you both have done has done a lot to help others become more comfortable telling their stories as well. This is a great work. You're a great couple. And
thank you, Tim.
Oh, shucks.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for those very kind words about the book and about us. I always told Sharon, with her looks and her brains and her personality, we're going to go far. I don't add much to it, but you know, I haven't had a lot of time to speak with you offline about some of these things. You know, I was blessed to meet you in Washington D.C. down there shortly after. You know, I guess it was shortly after we had our victory, right? Yeah. And you know, I'm anxious to witness for the Lord. There's no way, when truth and innocence counts for nothing, that any of us can win on our own. Our Lord and Savior carried us, and I'll gladly speak to you or anyone about him, because I have met him personally. And I'll tell you what, he really carried us through the fire. I said earlier that I'm just an average guy. I'm more average than the average guy. And there were many times that I thought I could not take another step. And because I had Sharon, and because I had a little faith and a little bit of hope, that we were able to make it through. And there's a lot of stuff in this book, and hopefully you got a couple of laughs out of it too, because if you're not laughing, sometimes you're crying. And I hope people will enjoy the book. And again, you've been very kind. Hopefully it will start to shine the light, and people who did not know will say, maybe there's something in this January 6th thing we haven't been told. There's more stuff coming out all the time. I don't know how it's all going to turn out, but Sharon and I have done this. We're putting it out there. We're putting ourselves out there. And after a while, we're going to set it aside, because January 6th is not who and what we are. And we've done our thing. And, well, I'll tell you what, there was a lot that went into that. And I had the toughest editor in the entire country. It's Sharon, because she had been through it. And when I stopped writing, I had over 586 pages of really good type manuscript. And she says, you know what? One, too big. Two, okay, stay focused. Yeah. Stay focused. And so I think that we were able to do that. I think everything that she did made it a better product. That's the way I feel. And I think your words are confirming that. So again, we're very thankful for this time with you, a chance to talk to you. We're thankful for a budding friendship with you. We thank you for all that you're doing for the J6ers and getting the word out and giving them a chance to find their voice on these recordings with you. And we hope to see you again in person soon, so we can hug you up as your schedule permits.
Absolutely. There's gonna be so many hugs. You're gonna get tired of hugging folks.
That's right.
Try me.
Yeah, absolutely. You a phenomenal editor. I tip my hat to you as well, Sharon. And absolutely.
One of the problems with getting a book like this published is you have to go out and you have to talk to publishing companies. Now, in the country nowadays, we've got what they call the Big Four, all out of New York City, probably up on Avenue of the Americas, I can't remember. But these are the kinds of publishing houses that we're used to. Random House, Doubleday, Scholastic, things like that. They're not interested, let me tell you right up front, they're not interested in this kind of story. Now, there are other publishers that have published books for conservatives, places like Post Hill Press, Bombardier, places like that. And you would think that they would have been happy to take on a project like this. I mean, gosh, they publish things written by Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and other people that we respect quite a bit. But they were less than lukewarm about this particular project, even when they were able to closely look at it. The first thing that is a problem in their eyes is that they said, you know what, the country's done with J6. People are over J6. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would like it to go away. But when we've had the opportunity, Sharon and I, to talk to people from South Carolina to Texas to Arizona, we find that people are hungry to know about the secrets of January 6th, what they have not been told. They don't believe the tripe that comes out of the media. And they've been very welcoming and very interested in our story. So there's that. The other problem with the publishers, I do have one particular publishing company, I won't name them, who said, yeah, we'd like to go with your book, but you got to get rid of that Jesus stuff. You got to cut down that Jesus stuff. And our faith is so foundational to this story. And I know that this story, quite frankly, is not my story. It's not our story. It's his story. And that came to me one day as we were driving on the Baltimore Beltway on a Saturday morning to go to see Dave Fisher to work all day long, slogging through so-called discovery. It's his story. So there was no way that we were going to rip out the faith part of this story. And because we would not do that, another door was closed on us. So it was difficult to bring this story to the public, but we persevered, and we hope that people will find this to be interesting, maybe enraging to see all the things that happened, but also we hope that it would be inspirational in some way.
Tom Caldwell, Sharon Caldwell. The book is The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Thank you so much.
Available at www.puffinpublishers.com. Sorry.
That's right.
Thanks, Tim.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And hey, I'm happy to do the audio book. I work for Chicken Strips and Mountain Dew.
Yeah, but do you like the barbecue sauce, or do you like,
Depends. Maybe only if there's no sweet and sour,
Okay, all right, sweet and sour. Make a note of that, honey. Sweet and sour. Okay,